quickly, you mentioned a 2-year lease term. Is that the same across all sectors? And I mean, is there an indexation after 1 year, or I mean, can you also persuade tenants to maybe go for a 5-year lease term for a cheaper rent?
Yeah, 2 years lease is especially office and the retails, and the no, sorry, the office and the residential. But like retails and the logistics, sometimes are going to be 3 to 5 years or 15 years because they want to do business there. So they have to put in the capital in the first time, and they have to get a return from there. So they need at least like 3 to 5 years for retails, and they need 15 years for the logistics or something like that. So it's negotiable with the tenants.
What's interesting is that the average stay or occupancy of an office tenant in New York is not very different from the average stay of an office tenant in Tokyo, notwithstanding the fact that we signed 5 and 7 year and 10-year leases, and they do 2-year leases. I think it has to do very much, it drives the quality of management in Japanese office buildings, because this is really what's going to cause the retention of tenants is the quality of what the services are that are provided. So it kind of intrigued me to find that the 2-year lease term business model is really not that much of an obstacle or it shouldn't be an obstacle to investors, because again, it looks intimidating to a U.S. or a European investor that you've got these 2-year leases rolling, but in the real world, that's really not the case.
Courts is probably the European model, is 10-year leases, indexation. I've done the deal, move on. I park it with a property manager, move on, because I'm only getting a 5%, 6% return. If I've got to actively manage things, I've got to employ more people, like your company, to drive those returns. So my entry yield has to be.
But I think we're all saying that actually, despite it being formally 2 years, the average lease length maybe is 7.5 years. And I used to work for Deutsche Bank, and they have a big global open-ended fund, and they were big buyers in Japan. And the Germans are very conscious of contractual terms. They'd only buy hotels on lease contracts, not on management contracts. But they bought heavily in Japan, despite that formal lease terms. So I think it's a very important point, and it's a part of becoming comfortable with how the market operates. But it is broadly similar, maybe to the US rather than the UK in terms of the lease profile.
You've got to remember those, the yields are relative to local bond rates. So, the spreads are pretty high. That's where you get your kind of compensation for risk.
Which is why you position yourself in the just sub A.
Yes, you get a very nice spread there. But and I'm not an expert on this, but I'm not conscious that this picture you present of scrabbling to find tenants, when they're sort of not to find, to keep. To keep. I'm not. My impression, and as I say, I'm not a very deep local expert in these matters, is that actually there's quite a lot of loyalty. I mean, Japanese are loyal people, and there's quite a lot of loyalty within the companies, as long as you spend time maintaining the relationship and you run the property management in a reasonably professional manner. Tenant retention is kind of number 10 on the list of things we worry about, really. Just from a practical perspective, it's just not as insecure as it looks. I mean, in the sense that the banks are comfortable, and I suspect the multi-occupancy is part of the answer. You've got medium-sized building with lots of 3 or 4 medium-sized tenants, slightly diversifies the risk. But after years of lending in that market, they're just used to kind of high levels of tenant retention.
Normally, their long term should be like 3 to 5 years, and they has gotten disposal rights after if the price is going down, they can dispose. So I think that they used to think that it's not so risky, even though the 2 years lease. But recently they realized a little bit risky. So, for example, Sumitomo Mitsui Sumitomo banks has gotten a joint venture with Zymax Corporation because they want to see that what happened in their property. So they are now thinking, examining about that risky. Yes, used to be they think it should be okay because they've gotten a right to dispose of property or something.